Albertosaurus, named for Alberta, Canada, was a meat-eating dinosaur that lived in western North America 70 million years ago. Albertosaurus weighed 3 tons and stood 13 feet tall. Pentaceratops reached a maximum weight of 5 tons and lived 70 million years ago. Pentaceratops used its turtle-like beak to consume more than 200 pounds of plants each day. Fossils of Pentaceratops have been found only in northwestern New Mexico.
It is the most lifelike robot I've ever seen. The beginning of these types of robots was in the 80s, and this one is really, I mean, there must be a whole new generation of these things that are much more lifelike, much more sophisticated motion than the old school one. The explanation I've heard for children, why they're so fascinated, is that dinosaurs are just big. And children are very interested in big things. Their parents, adults are big relative to them. So dinosaurs have that. But dinosaurs are extinct, and they're very strange looking. So they're either scared of them or captivated. And I just think that they're so weird. I was in love with dinosaurs as a kid, but in the end, I got interested in other things, and then I came back to paleontology when I was in college. But I myself do not primarily study dinosaurs. I study fossils older than dinosaurs. I apply the fossils to geological problems. I was very interested in geological time when I got into college, and I would tell you that primarily that is what my research is. It's using fossils to determine the ages of rocks, and particularly determine the sequence of events, what happened in Earth history. Well, part of it's because if you go to the southwest, the western U.S., it's relatively dry. There's a lot of rock exposed. You know, we don't have these big forests and soils covering all the rocks like you would have once you got east of the Mississippi. You don't see as many rocks at the surface. So that gives us an opportunity to find many more fossils because we can actually see the bedrock. So the New Mexico Museum of Natural History and Science opened its doors to the public in 1986. The museum was actually created by an act of legislation in Santa Fe in 1982, but it took a few years to get a building built, etc. And this museum tries to cover all natural science. Most of our exhibits are about fossils. They're paleontological, but we also do astronomy, we do aspects of biology and geology, and we even try to cover a little bit of physics and chemistry in the program. The main theme of the exhibits, and this was when the museum was built and it remains, was to provide the visitor with a walk through time. Well, this is an exhibit that we did we did this exhibit in collaboration with the Santa Fe Institute on the origin of life. And this opened several years ago, and it's attempting to, ideas about the origin of life change. The science is, goes back and forth like all science. But this tries to present the best scientific understanding or ideas about life's origin here, and we have more to that effect. So the way the exhibits begin literally is we literally begin with like the origin of the solar system, the origin of Earth, etc. And then you'll see we quickly reach a world where in New Mexico we actually have fossils, because we don't have fossils in New Mexico that are older than about 500 million. And if you consider the planet is over 4 billion years old, and the oldest fossils are about almost 4 billion. We don't have the oldest fossils here because we just don't have the rocks, but we have rocks through many, many time periods going forward from there. And then we get into the earliest fossils, which are shown here. They're bacteria and algae and things of that sort. And then you finally get to actual animal fossils. And these animal fossils come a little younger than 600 million years. You start to get real animal fossils. But the big gap, and this is kind of a placeholder, between about 600 million and say 250 million, we don't really have a completed haul. So this is one of the gaps in the timeline that we're working to fill in. So what we have here is just some examples of fossils from that time interval, which would be called, in the geologic timescale, it's called Paleozoic. It's before the Mesozoic. So see, this is the Triassic Hall. At the entrance, we have the Triassic globe where all the continents are united into one. They're one we call supercontinent, Pangaea. This is Gondwana, this is Laurasia or Laurussia, and they've all crunched together. And the hall begins with that, and then it tells you what the weather was like in New Mexico. It tells you what time we're talking about. And this hall's bilingual. All the labeling is in English and Spanish. It begins with the Big Extinction, right? Which it turns out we don't have a rock and fossil record of the extinction here in New Mexico. We just don't have that record. You have to go, actually in North America, there is no really good record of it. The best records are in South Africa, Russia, China, and other places. The agreed on idea now is it was caused by a huge volcanic field. One of the biggest volcanic fields in Earth's history is called the Siberian Traps. And I think everybody pretty much agrees that the Traps eruption caused the extinction. But what's not agreed on is what the actual causing. You can sit there and say, well, all these volcanoes went off and caused extinction. Well, how did it do it? Did it do it through polluting the atmosphere? Did it do it through, just the violence of the eruptions? That's not fully agreed on. And it's difficult to know, because when you look at these ancient lavas, it's hard to know what gases really came out of the volcano. And that's really what you're looking for. So if you get a lot of sulfur from the volcano, you'll get sulfuric acid in the atmosphere, you get acid rain. If you get a lot of dust, it can cool the planet. There are all sorts of possible outcomes from massive volcanic eruptions, but it's not easy to look back in the past, in this case, 250 million, and say, okay, this is exactly what these volcanoes did to the Earth. So this is the earlier part of the Triassic, which we don't have a big fossil record of. We do have some animals. Our record is mostly of the later part of the Triassic, like the second half of the Triassic, and most of the hall is dedicated to that, because it really is a hall about New Mexico's Triassic. So this hall, we have a very large collection of Triassic fossils for New Mexico. I worked a lot on the Triassic, particularly in the 1990s, and I had students at UNM. I had a couple of guys who did PhDs on the Triassic, so we collected a lot of fossils so that we could populate the hall with them. And the message of the hall that we wanted people to get was that it's sort of the first lesson of biodiversity, that at any point in time, that's true today and it's true in the Triassic, you can kind of put organisms into one of three groups. There are things that are going extinct, There are things that are just first evolving, first appearing, and then there are things that are just persisting. So if you think about it today, things like mammoths have just gone extinct. Things that are persisting, cockroaches, pine trees that have been around for millions of years. And then, of course, things that are just evolving, and we know this. Viruses, things like HIV, COVID, these are new organisms. Well, it looks like two things happened. One, there was an asteroid impact that definitely had a very negative effect. But now, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, most scientists would have said the asteroid impact did it all. But now there's been a rethinking of this enormous volcanic field, which is in India, called the Deccan Traps, or the Deccan volcanic field. And now we know that Deccan really blew up right at the time of dinosaur extinction. So the current thinking, I think for most scientists, is it's a mixture of Deccan and the asteroid. But it's kind of like what I was saying about the end Permian or the Perma-Triassic extinction. How exactly that caused the extinction still remains a topic of investigation. And that plays into what you asked, the selectivity of the extinction, okay? All extinctions are selective. If they weren't, life on Earth would be gone. So it's a really hard question. Why did dinosaurs all go away, but not crocodiles, not turtles, and other birds, etc.? Why don't other groups go extinct? And we have this question at all the big extinctions. A lot of scientists think that because crocodiles were amphibious, they could live in the water, that may have protected them. But I'm not sure. I don't think anybody thinks that's the whole answer. Talk about very quick events, like there's a number of scientists who think that the impact, whatever the impact did, played out within a matter of years or maybe 100 years. So you're saying to me now, okay, take me back 65 million years ago and show me what happened in 10 years. It's almost impossible to get that kind of resolution. You have to realize that human evolution begins 60 million or so years after dinosaurs go extinct. So even if the dinosaurs had survived, they may well have gone extinct long before that. And there's a group of paleontologists who think the dinosaurs were a group in trouble already. They were going extinct, and then comes this asteroid and the volcanism. So I always say, this is a group that was in trouble, then they just had a really bad day. 99% of everything that's been alive on this Earth is extinct. Extinction, we make a big deal out of extinction, and we even attach value to it. We say, oh, you went extinct, you must be a loser of some sort. And in reality, that's not the case. The fact is, things are evolving and going extinct all the time. And so right now, we have organisms that are going extinct. Some of them because of human activity, of pollution and overgrazing or overhunting or overfishing or whatever. But at the same time, you're right. When they go extinct, then new things will show up. And it's a kind of process of renewal that goes on through geologic time. So this Triassic Hall shows you a lot of fossils from New Mexico of early dinosaurs, the reptiles and amphibians that live with them, etc. And then we enter the Jurassic Hall, which, okay, this is Jurassic Park, if you will. And this Jurassic Hall, we remodeled this hall in '04. So it also opened in '86, but it's a fair bit different. The main thing we didn't change is this mural. And this mural was painted by a woman named Eleanor Kish, who was a very famous dinosaur artist. She worked for the Smithsonian, she worked for the National Museum of Canada, and she painted this mural for this museum in the early 1980s. And when we remodeled the hall, we basically said, we're going to keep the mural, we're not going to, and then we changed a lot about the hall. And of course, the main thing the hall does is it shows the truly giant dinosaurs that lived in New Mexico during the later part of the Jurassic, and that would be about 150 million years ago. It's a fun thing to sit there and watch the reaction of people, particularly kids, when they come around the corner and they see this is a 110-foot long dinosaur skeleton. It's curled around because the room is only 70 feet long. So it's been put in what we consider a lifelike posture. It's being attacked by the meat eater, and really the hall is in a way, it's a diorama. If you look at it, the rockwork, the plants, these are fake plants, they all kind of come out of the mural. The game is to take the mural and sort of give it a three-dimensional aspect. But it's not truly a diorama because we wouldn't have skeletons if it was. We'd have models. This animal, which is called Seismosaurus, was only found from part of the skeleton. So what we did is we took the actual bones and made replicas of them, and then we took a close relative, an animal named Diplodocus, which is known from complete skeletons, and we made replicas of its bones that we were missing from Seismosaurus, and then we made a composite. And but this is all made of plastic, and even weighing plastic, even being plastic, it weighs about 1,500 pounds, the whole cast. But it's intended to give you the feel for the size, the sheer size of these animals. Look at this. It's a replica of the leg of a Brachiosaurus. I'm not even as tall as its knee. And Jurassic's interesting because we have the origin of birds during the late Jurassic, and that's what this exhibit conveys. And then what we have here is we have a kind of a segue into the next time period, which is the Cretaceous. And in New Mexico, the Cretaceous begins with a big record of dinosaur tracks. So that's what we portray here. The most famous Cretaceous dinosaur track site in New Mexico is at Clayton Lake, which is a state park in the northeastern part of the state. And that's what we're showing here. We have some tracks from Clayton Beach where these animals walked, et cetera, et cetera. We have about 90,000 cataloged fossils. But sometimes we'll take like 10 shells and give them one number. So I always say my estimate is we have about 150,000 fossils in the collection. And that still might be a low number. We may have actually more than that. Yeah, I'll take you to the collection. The collection is like a library of fossils. And people go to libraries to read books, to check out books, to learn. A lot of scientists and students come to the collection to study fossils. So this is the hall, this is New Mexico's seacoast, okay? And this is really a hall that's attempting to show an environment. And the environment's very simple. It just shows you that during the latter part of the Cretaceous, say 90 million, 70 million, a shallow sea covered a lot of western North America. And New Mexico was right on the coast of that sea. And there were coastal jungles. We have a forest there. And of course we have the dinosaurs, the plants, the other animals that were living in those jungles or in the shallow sea. And that's what the hall conveys. And it's even, we've even got audio. I mean, there were birds, you would have seen birds in the Cretaceous that you would have easily recognized as birds. They look just like modern birds in many ways. But we think birds are the descendants of dinosaurs, but I still think it's fair to treat dinosaurs as a different group of animals. When some paleontologists say, oh, you shouldn't really make that distinction. Dinosaurs and birds are the same group, but I think they're different enough that you can think of them in separate groups. So we have various fossils of plants and animals here. I mean, the Cretaceous is important because it's when flowering plants appear. So, of course, flowers appear, and so do what we would call social insects, things like bees and butterflies. Their fossil record begins along with the flowering plants because they're there to pollinate. And it's a classic, the exhibit here talks about this, it's a classic example of what is called coevolution, or one group of organisms, in this case the bugs, are affected by another group, in this case the flowers, but there's a synergy, back and forth. The flowers need the bugs to pollinate them, the bugs need the pollen as food, and so they've co-evolved. They work together through time to do their thing. We have a lot of important fossils, that we can put on display. As a crocodile skull. These are shells of cephalopods, of marine animals, fossil plants, shark's teeth. Yeah, and this shows some of that, selectivity we're talking about. Here's turtles, boom. Here's the extinction level, crocodiles, boom, going through. Dinosaurs are gone, but this is intended to represent birds continuing on. Mammals, really not much happened, sharks. And then you've got other groups like the ammonites, that really died off. These garfish are some of the lowest paid state employees. I always say they don't get paid much. You know, fish like this lived in the Rio Grande. I'm not sure they live there anymore. But these are kind of living fossils, you could say. They're a kind of fish that was around, looked pretty much the same when the dinosaurs were here, and here they are today. And this is a fossil stump, you know, that we collected in northwestern New Mexico years ago to put in the exhibit. You know, it's an actual fossil tree, base of a fossil tree. So now we leave the seacoast, you know, the Cretaceous. So this is the world after dinosaur extinction, which in geologic time terms would be called the Cenozoic world or the Tertiary world, and it's really the age of mammals. In New Mexico, we have a lot of mammal fossils, but there's also a lot of volcanic activity. And so we devote a certain amount of the hall to just volcanism and the geology of volcanoes. This hall, though, is not really finished. It's kind of, in my mind, it's still a placeholder. We're working to make a more complete exhibition out of it. What it does is we have these murals, which we borrowed from the Smithsonian to show the extinct mammals, and then we have some representative fossils, you know, from our collection. But at the end of the day, we're working, I think, again, next year you'll come back and this will have changed. We have a special relationship with the Smithsonian as an affiliate, and I'm a research associate of the Smithsonian because I work, a couple of the curators of the Smithsonian are very long-term collaborators of mine scientifically. So yeah, we benefit from that relationship, as do they, I think. And then finally, what happens is we emerge, this is the end of a walk through time, and we emerge during the ice ages, you know, during the last, say, 2 or 3 million years of Earth history, New Mexico history. And of course, we have animals like mammoths and these big camels and things like that lived here. Something that was bought back in the early 80s, and my understanding now is you can't get these anymore because of the conservation of the giant trees. The rings, you can count the rings, and here's the Pueblo Revolt in 1680, here's Columbus back here, you know, it goes all the way back. Here's Marco Polo, 1295, there's been an estimate. See, Coronado shows up, Declaration of Independence, on and on. There is, I'm not going to show it to you, there is an entire space science wing with a planetarium. Then there's a big screen theater, you know, over there that we have as well. And that pretty much completes the public space. Now let's go across the street to space that's not public, where we keep the collections in the labs. Have always been occurring, that climates have always been changing. So in some ways you could look at what's going on Earth today and say, hey, it's really not that out of the normal. Now, but what makes it out of the normal, of course, in terms of Earth history, is us. You know, we're the ingredient in the modern world that didn't exist, you know, for most of Earth history. So our activities, which are, you know, whether it be, you know, polluting things or overgrazing or overhunting or whatever, they've had an effect on things. So I do think that in terms of human activity, we are the new ingredient. And you're right, we can debate whether human activity is also causing or pushing climate change. That's debated, although the majority of scientists think it is. And I even tell this to younger scientists, you know, climate is a very complex problem that has not really been resolved. We really do not understand a lot of things about global climate. And I say it's the biggest game in town scientifically. You know, if somebody comes to me, a 20-year-old person, you know, and says, hey, I want to be a scientist, you know, I said, well, don't be a paleontologist. Get into climate, get into some aspect of climate, because that's where we need work. That's where a lot of the research is going to happen, or the exciting discoveries are going to still be made. This is the lab where the fossils are prepared. By that I mean, preparation to it means that they're cleaned of rock, they're glued together, they're stabilized, they're made available for either research or exhibition. I'm challenged by the research I'm doing. I'm interested in the science I'm working on. I'm lucky because my work requires a lot of intellectual creativity, and it's very interesting. We go out in the field, you find things that are totally new or find things we don't really understand them, and then we try to gain a better understanding. This is the fossil collection. What I tell people is this is the fossil collection of the state of New Mexico, because we are the state museum that does paleontology. As I said earlier, the best way to think about it is it's a library of fossils. It's a room full of fossils. Every fossil has a catalog number. That's what these cards do. They give you, and all of this information and more is in computer databases. And we have a collections manager, and a big part of her job is to maintain those databases. So we know what we have, where it is, what's going on with it, because the uses of the fossils are diverse. Everything that's on display across the street is from this collection. There are fossils here that used to be on display. They've been retired and returned. There are fossils here that will go on display. It's a source, a resource for public education in the exhibition facility. But there are other educational aspects. One of our educators is going to go to a school, and he or she wants to show the kids a dinosaur bone, check it out, and bring it back. And then we have scientists and students who come, as I said earlier, to study the fossils. So, and the thing is that when you're doing scientific research, it is just another form of public education. You're generally educating people who have PhDs. You have a specific audience, but you're educating nonetheless. So the collection is really here for scientific purposes and all the public education you could provide. Well, we have about 91,000 catalog numbers associated with the collection, but there are many more fossils, and they vary in size. The first order organization is all the big stuff that won't fit in drawers and cabinets is on these open shelves. Then we have all the stuff that will fit in cabinets, etc. And it's a big educational resource. I see it as, to me, it's one of the cornerstones of the museum. It's a foundational thing. The Explora Science Center is next door to us, and that's a some would call it a children's museum or a children's science center, but they don't have any collections. And that, to me, separates them from a true museum. A true museum has collections, be it an art museum with an art collection, a dinosaur museum, or whatever you want to call us, with a fossil collection. The Explora Center is a science center. It's a place to learn about science, but they don't have collections. And since we have collections, that allows us to do original research in natural history. That's a dinosaur bone. It's a part of a shoulder girdle, and it was collected by putting paper and plaster, we call it a jacket, encasing it. And then the jacket was cut open, that whole side was cleaned. And we didn't feel like it was necessary to clean the whole thing and stabilize it, so we have it here sitting on that sort of half jacket to hold it together. These are the younger mammal stuff, rhinoceroses. It's a mammoth molar. This is part of a mammoth jaw. That's one molar. I always tell the kids, I always say, hey, I hate to brush my teeth. I always did. I said, can you imagine if your teeth were that big? How much work it would be to brush them? That's part of the tail of a duck-billed dinosaur found near Farmington, northwestern New Mexico. It's part of the backbone of Seismosaurus, and it's kind of a funny story. We rented it years ago. There was an exhibit in Tokyo of giant dinosaurs, and they wanted to borrow that. So they did, and that's why it looks like that. The shipper, because it went to Japan, the shipper came in and built, there was a red metal box, a wooden crate, and it was put on a tractor trailer truck. It was driven to the port of Los Angeles, put on a ship. Ship took it to Tokyo. It was in this exhibit for like 6 months, temporary exhibit. Then it came back. And what's interesting about that, since it was shipped, we know what it weighs. And what do you think it weighs? So this is the preparation lab. We have one preparator who's in the state of Illinois, but he trains youngsters like this guy to do fossil preparation. Most of the work in here is done by volunteers. So see, this is a leg bone of a duck-billed dinosaur, and he's cleaning it up, taking, you asked about that. How do you get all the rock off?
I'm just prepping off the matrix, the top of the matrix of the bone itself, and just use a very small scribe to kind of just take off just a millimeter of matrix at a time, down to getting where the bone is. Beige kind of color right here is the bone, and this little darker color on top of it is what they call mudstone. Often these fossils fall into a swamp, and then they get surrounded with the mud and stuff that's in the swamp, trees and debris and all that kind of stuff. And so that's what I'm removing. I've been working on this little area for a couple of days now, and it's not very much. You have to go really slow. My name is Jacques Ramey.
So for him, to prepare a fossil bone like that, it can take months of work. And people don't really appreciate that, because when you go out and look at the exhibits, every fossil that's out there has been prepared in this lab. And you're looking, when you go out in the exhibits and you look at all the dinosaur bones, you're looking at many person years of work in this lab to get those bones cleaned up, stabilized, ready for exhibition. The reality is you rarely find a complete fossil. Almost all fossils have suffered some sort of damage, over the millions of years, and you have to try to repair or compensate for the damage. You sign up to be a volunteer at the museum. You tell the woman who's our volunteer coordinator, I'd like to work in the fossil lab. And then the fossil preparator, the employee, he'll train you. And if you have the skills and the ability, you can work in the lab.
This is still bone. This has not fossilized because it's only 13,000 years old. And this is Sandoval County, near Zia Pueblo. In fact, the Zia Pueblo people helped us get this out. So what is amazing about this was found in a gypsum quarry, and they were stripping off the layer, and they lost part of this camel's skull. And you can see, this is what you're seeing. This is camel, and all the rest of this is ancient bison. And it's all from New Mexico. All this debris is full of glue to support this. So everything stayed here, because if you tried to remove this, it would fall apart. You can see teeth right there. You can see camel teeth. Camels originated in North America. And they migrated to south, and they ended up other places, but they originated in North America. Horses, the true horse, originated in North America. And they became extinct, maybe people ate them, they migrated across the Bering Strait. So there was 3 major migrations of horses. So who brought them back? Spanish. They brought them back, and they brought back what's called the Iberian Mustang. The reason they brought that back, because they were small, tough, great endurance, and they fit on a ship.